Good to see y'all, man. You know,
Yes.
nice to be back
Likewise.
here in our discussion board where we can talk movement, Five Live. You know what I mean? Today, we want to talk a little bit about hip hop, how it's a part of all of our lives and how it cultivated us and how it's connected in so many different spaces, not only through our upbringing, but nowadays as a part of popular cultures within academia. So we wanted to touch on that and
Hip hop.
bring in some special guests.
Yes. Definitely looking forward to speaking with Crystal Frazier and
Crystal
Duane
Frazier.
Holland Jr. Yes.
Great friends of ours in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's good to see what they're doing now, carrying the culture of hip hop and the movement into academic spaces while still keeping in the professional realm and creating work and teaching in other realms as well. So it'll be good to have that conversation. But Dougie, why don't we start with you, man? We talking hip hop. So how hip hop manifests in your life as a movement, as a culture, and
Wow. It's funny because when you just said that, and that took me back to the movie Breaking. And I think growing up in the 80s, street dancing, break dancing, and breaking was prevalent. And I remember that movie and how just the energy of the dancing and the whole concept of bringing hip hop to the stage was kind of, now that you're talking about it, it was kind of burned into my mind early on. And I'm actually just realizing that now, because the whole concept of that movie was that they were taking the culture, the hip hop culture from the street and trying to present it onto a stage, a more, I would say, technical stage, theater, Broadway.
More exposure. Yeah. It just has more exposure. You know what I mean? Like that's really what catapulted the culture of hip hop into a different space, was once we were able to see it visibly. It was something that we were already living though, which is the great thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's the culture that we come from, but now to see it catapulted onto a worldwide stage changes how we connect to it and how we adapt and how we represent it. You know what I mean? Marc, you want to give your insights?
Yeah. I think what I think about is is the subconscious aspects of it that you don't even realize. Where you're not conscious of being a younger kid and emulating what I was seeing on TV, and then seeing how that's also manifested itself in how I chose to dress and express myself, wearing my clothes backwards.
Yeah,
crisscross, right? Being influenced by graffiti, spray painting my jeans, your haircuts,
right?
Getting lines in your hair, at the barbershop. All of that stuff I think are things that are sometimes overlooked because they're just subconscious things that are influencing you that you may not be aware of. I mean, the obvious things are the music and the dancing that sometimes, that's powerful. But then what are those aspects that are showing up in your life that are influencing you in ways that sometimes you're not even aware of?
True.
So, yeah.
I think one of the amazing things is that now we are all in a space of reflection, especially being in the academic space. You start to think about all the things that have influenced why you teach the way you do, why you perform the way you do, why you do what you do. So, and then us having that connection, being brought together in Philly, the Philly hip hop scene, is legendary. In the culture itself, it has played a large part in what we did while we were there in Philly, especially with that relationship as we were mentioning last week with Rennie Harris and Pure Movement, and how I had met Rennie long before I came to Philly, and then just linking with other people associated with him and recognizing how important the culture of hip hop is to manifest in every different way. You know, it was Rennie that kind of showed me, like how you said, Dougie, taking something that you saw on the streets and putting it into a different platform, a different space. Rennie was one of the first people that I saw that took hip hop from the streets and put it into a contemporary dance scene, a modern dance scene. And that alone changed my trajectory with and connection to modern dance, being able to see myself as hip hop through the lens of like contemporary dance. And meeting Crystal and Duane back in those days, this is in the late 90s, you know what I mean? And then coming to Philly, meeting y'all, being able to connect the way that we connected and vibed and develop what we developed, to always still stay grounded in the culture that raised us, you know what I mean? I think that's a real good introduction to bring Crystal and Duane in to the conversation.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I haven't spoken to them in so long. I'm excited.
I know. I'm trying to think the last time I saw them.
Yo, yeah.
Oh, wow. Crystal.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Hey.
What up?
Hi, I miss you.
It's been so long.
Mwah, 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 mwah. I love you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, D, what's good?
Is he on mute?
You gotta unmute your mic, Duane, Mr. Lee. I'm gonna keep while we're talking.
Okay, it's fake.
There he is.
To the live Facebook. I'll let y'all know if it ever goes live, but we're gonna have our conversation and record it on Zoom. But we were just talking about, you know, that connection that we all have through hip hop as the culture that raised us, and really representing that in whatever way it manifests in our lives, especially in the academic spaces that we're all in now. It's a beautiful thing to always recognize the legacy and the lineage and the things that have influenced what it is that we do. And you being a part of, you know, for me specifically, you know how I feel about you, Crystal. Like, you're such a near and dear part of, and Duane, how I began my dancing and really my movement in general, finding myself through movement. And being so close to you still over the years, you know, it's a reflection on that level of influence and how important it is still to me now. And I always say to you and to Duane, how grateful I am that y'all are teaching in academic spaces, because I know that the kids that y'all are teaching are getting the truth. You know what I mean? Like, so wanted to bring y'all in so y'all can speak about, you know, y'all connections to hip hop, and especially to Rennie and all those sorts of things. You know, I got to readmit Duane.
All right, Crystal, would you like to, how did you start?
How did I start dancing, or just in hip hop?
Like this whole hip hop culture, because, you know, being in Philly, you're like the princess of hip hop in Philadelphia. You know what I mean? I'm like, so I would love to hear your beginnings in that whole cultivating, especially women in hip hop.
I would say it had to start it as in my youth, as a child, in my childhood days. You know, being with your friends, watching videos, going outside, get your little 8 counts in, got your little jam box on the street and the sidewalk. But I will say, growing up, I would say about when I got to middle school, which was 6th, 7th, in 8th grade, I learned about a breaking crew in our town, which was called the Floor Invaders. So that was pretty much my first introductory to, I didn't even know it was called hip hop. I just knew they were breaking. And I was like, oh, this is cool. What are they doing? You know what I mean? And actually, my sister one night, because they were all older guys, and there were some people that were in my school, like some of the guys that break as well in my grade. And my sister took me to one of their practices. And they allowed me to get in a circle because at that time, I was growing up in a dance studio, getting my 5, 6, 7, 8 on in ballet and modern jazz. You know? So I would play around and try to mimic what they were doing. And what I didn't realize, is that my first jazz solo at the dance studio, I did Jam on It. And I asked my teacher specifically, I was like, I want to do the 6-step. I want to do a moonwalk. I want to like do wings. What I was doing, I was just mimicking. And thank God my dance teacher, she was open. She was like, let's do it. And next thing you know, I'm on the floor doing my fake 6-step, doing the worm, I'm doing the way I'm glide. Like, it's funny, like when I go back to think about that one specific dance to where I am today in hip hop dance forms and connecting with Rennie, because I've always trained ballet, modern, and jazz. And then when I came to Philly, if it wasn't for meeting like Cricket and all them, because Michelle Bird and I, who runs Ladies of Hip Hop, and we ran Montage together, we grew up together. And because of her, when I was younger, she would take me to clubs. And she would be like, oh, and she would do the dances they were doing. And I'm like, what's this? And I would go in my little corner practice, and I would come back to see what else was going on. And that made my way into Pulsations, where I met Duane, I met all of Pure Movement, but I didn't even know. You know what I mean? Wow. So because of Michelle, she opened up my eyes, which made me fall in love with house, is because from her taking me to clubs all the time in my high school days, which led me into Philly with University of Arts. Knowing Cricket and seeing them on the streets, next thing I know, I'm at a Pure Movement show, and I'm like, these are the guys I know at the club.
Right.
I'm ready, like,
shout out to Cricket.
Get me in. And I felt like every time I saw him at the club, I felt like I was auditioning, because I will freestyle in front of him, like, don't you think I'm good enough to be in the company? Like, you know. So it really begins with my childhood days. Like I said, just getting those 8s, learning dances, what kids are doing today in videos, or, you know, some of the dances are learning on TikTok. Like, I was just watching videos and going outside and just doing the dances. And then we would do them at our little school dances. I didn't think it would become like this for me. I didn't know this was going to be my life, and I was going to eat, sleep, and educate people on it.
Wow. Can you talk, Crystal? Can you talk a little bit about Montage?
Montage, yes.
And how that came about.
Oh, Montage, yes. I was dancing with Rennie at the time, and I was slowly sliding out, and it had nothing to do with the company. It was just me as a person not knowing where exactly I wanted to be. And one day we were at the club, and Michelle was like, I want to start an all-girl group. And I was like, okay, cool. Thinking like I'm just going to be in it, not that I was going to become a co-founder. And then once we really sat down and talked about it, and she's like, I just really want a platform for women, for all women, all sizes, ages, colors. It didn't matter, just the pure love of it and having that space. And I was down for it. And next thing you know, I would say was that in 98? I think that was October 98 is when we began. Okay. And I remember being in Point Breeze studio with like an entourage of women trying to create dances and start Montage up and get it creating and moving. But it was a beautiful thing because, you know, we were able to bring in others to come and train us. We were able to put on shows. It helped me build me as a person, coming from an all-male company to an all-female company, and realizing how masculine my movement was, dancing with Rennie and the men, because I'm a female, I didn't get it a free like ticket. And whatever we were doing, I had to do whatever the males were doing. So Rennie wasn't watering down anything because I was a female. So I felt like I was always like this aggressive, like trying to do what they were doing, trying to do my handstand push-ups like Duane.
We got to bring Duane into this conversation.
I know. I'll get his perspective on it.
Yo. Yeah. So, and then to shift over to being an all-female company, it brought back my feminine side, and I was able to connect the two.
Find that balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important. No real proper introductions. So, Crystal, why don't you tell? You know, this is for the recording. We're not live, but just say what you are, what you do now, currently. You know, all the things that you do outside of, you know, with the university and abroad. You know. Yes,
right now I am the assistant professor at Point Park University. I am their first hip hop educator as part of the curriculum. They had it as an elective, but now they have hip hop 4 days a week, and it's part of the jazz department. Outside of that, I am trying to go to as many conferences I can go to as IABD. I am a director for Dancers Inc. competition and convention. I feel like I do a lot and I don't even know. Is that bad?
Nah.
I'm like, what else do I do? I'm so humble. I don't even know.
But that's what we love.
To show you, you know, more than you can even think about.
Yeah, and I choreograph. I go to different universities. I do residencies and to set work or to speak about hip hop dance forms.
Yeah. Shout out to IABD.
I just can't think.
IABD.
IABD. Duane Lee.
Hey.
The legendary warrior.
Legendary. There he is in the flesh.
There he is, Duane.
I haven't seen this guy in a long time.
I love y'all. I love y'all. Thank y'all for this too. Like this is so important to do. Thank you for having us. Like,
thanks for coming on. Thanks for agreeing to come on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, man. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you are and what you're doing and the multiplicity of things that you are doing, and then tag into Crystal's story of the mid to late 90s and how you log in with all of that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm currently at University of Wisconsin-Madison, building the space for this Bachelor of Fine Arts with a focus of hip hop and commercial studies, and realizing that it is really about building an archival space, really for the research that we literally have been a part of creating in the last 40 years, because of the fact that hip hop has been situated at the nucleus of our crafting of however we create work. And I feel that, now it's time for us to come back together to kind of create this space of not only practice, but theory, because now it's going into higher learning. And I feel like now it's time for us to be able to claim that space as a community that's not only in the commercial field and finding it, we're all finding our way of like empowering ourselves by finding our way back to academia. And I feel like now it's like we need to assemble to create this space of like really authenticating what it is to be a part of Black American, I can't even say dance culture, like Black American art
Movement,
culture.
man. This is all movement. We talk movement, bruh.
Right. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm a county brownie from outside of Philly. President Pennsylvania main line all day long. Started out as a gymnast, training for the 92 and 96 Olympics. Gymnastics was my life. It still very much is. But I grew up in a family that was very much like I feel like any Black or brown family. We have music playing all the time. We commune with, those are like the elements: music, dancing, and language, right? So that's basically what every Thanksgiving, Easter, even cleaning,
Show me the latest dance. What's the latest dance,
listen,
right?
My sister was the one who got me started. I swear, my sister and my cousin Tanya, like every Thanksgiving, like they would show the new dances, and they like to pop, so I saw popping on women first, and they were bad as shit. But anyway, I don't know if so I grew up with that, but they were also a very, strict family about making a living, and nobody believed that you can make a living being an artist. So, they were educators, they were lawyers, they were, but I really loved, I would watch all of the dance shows, all of the award shows, anything that came on PBS about dance, and I would tape it. Actually, Rennie used to have a show called One House Street. That used
yes.
Right before Soul Train. Like I used to tape stuff like that while I was training. So I would go to school and then come home. I would finish my homework at school, and Rennie also had this show called Dancing on Air, right? Well, he was on there, but then eventually became Dance Party USA, which he like really was a part of the creation. But there was a show called Dancing on Air, and it was on the same sound stage that American Bandstand was on. So every day I would come home, and my sister, my cousins, they would all go to the show, like cut school and like get down there so they would get on. So that is the type of culture that I grew up in, but we also were athletes. So that was really also our way of getting into higher education. But
another movement.
Yeah, but at that time it was like 1990. So, you know, hip hop was, my brother and I were 17 months apart. And like I said, my sister is 10 years older than us. So she was constantly dancing, constantly had music going. And, you know, breaking was the new thing. So my brother and I would try to learn routines, like make up routines together, and teaching each other how to do back handsprings, like falling on our neck, I think. But then we eventually, we were tearing up my mom's house so much that my mom was like, all right, you need to figure out something to do. So I got into gymnastics and he got into like everything else. And, you know, that at the same time, you know, you have like Tina Landon, you have like a Swoop and Fatima, like choreographing all of these things for all these artists. And that's what I knew. Like, also at that time, I don't even know if they have these things anymore, but they used to have a lot of like teen clubs around the Philly area. And it was tough. Like people would go and battle. There was there was Pulsations. There was another one called Popcorns. There was another one called Breakers. Like it was serious. People would come and dance. And that's actually where I met Les Rivera. And then he introduced me to cricket. And then I had moved away to Houston to train, but I would come back on the weekends and go out. And when I would go out, my brother would tell me, because he would still go out and, you know, go to the clubs, he ran into Crystal. So I came home and he was telling me about, to a point where like Crystal would call our house and I would give her a hard time. Like that's kind of how we linked, literally. And, you know, Les used to come to our house and Brendan and I would teach him all the new dances. Les was originally from Puerto Rico. He moved here when he was like 10 or 11 or something.
Wow.
So I would bring him, he would come to the house and we trained. He was also a gymnast. So we trained at the same gym. So we would literally come to my house, learn the dances, and then go to the gym and work out for 4 hours. And then on the weekend, go to the club because you had to be dressed when you went to the club. So, you know, there was like, so that whole culture, you know, that really affected what I wanted to do. I didn't want to work at, you know, my mom was like, you need to figure out how to get a job. I was like, I'm not doing Burger King. I'm going to be a dancer for somebody. So we, you know, Les took me to a rehearsal and he started dancing with Rennie. Cricket brought him in. You know, he showed me a piece where actually Joni Collins, right? That's her last name. Joni, Chachi, they were doing this piece, like a legendary duet that was happening, and I think Rennie knew of them as well. And this other girl named Kim and Anissa, along with Clyde, Brandon, all the original members. Yeah, Clyde, Brandon, and Cricket. And then they brought in Les, and Les brought me to a rehearsal. 2 weeks later, I'm performing at the Mandel Theater with them.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, you know, so I'm training, I'm going to high school, but Rennie he thought I was 21 years old. He didn't even know I was 17.
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't even know it for like 3 years. I'm on tour with him, and he's like, how old are you now? So it was, I was also, you know, doing gymnastics and doing stuff for United States Gymnastics Federation. So it was, I think I was a little bit, you know, I was able to be mature in a space and be quiet and listen and understand what was needed. And I guess it was to a point that he thought I was grown and I was on my own. So, Yeah, that's how Crystal and I met, you know, and it got to a point where I lived at Crystal's house. Like I couldn't, people would see me or they would see her and they'd be like, okay, so the other one is around somewhere.
Somewhere.
Right.
You know, that's how it was.
Yes.
But
Yeah, I think the three of us can relate to that. That's kind of, that was our thing in Philly too. If you saw one, you were like, where are the other two?
Exactly. So, you know, but coming up through that whole also star power competition space, I went to a dance school called Betsy Daly, and I love Betsy. She still has her school, but she also worked on the Steel Pier with Frank Hatchett and Joe Meyer.
Shout out to my former boss,
right?
JB,
Frank Hatchett.
The matriarch, right? The matriarch. So I was introduced to Frank Hatchett through Betsy. And then that introduced me to the whole hip hop scene because, you know, Buddha was already teaching classes at Broadway Dance Center.
Right.
And that's also where you would see like Big Les, you would see Josie, like when MTV would do, you know, whoever was doing a new video, they would always show like pieces of their choreography. And Broadway Dance Center was like space. So I got introduced to that world at like 14, you know, figuring out like, could I actually make a living doing it? And then by 17 was going and taking class in the city. My mom was allowing me to go and take class. And then that was it. I was hooked. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, you know? And once Rennie took me on tour, it was a done deal. I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
All right.
My life.
I love it.
Yeah, that's what's up.
We should segue into you know, just what the current state of hip hop and I guess the evolution.
With that being said,
Crystal, pull back.
What'd she say?
She
went back. She leaned back.
Yeah, that touched the nerve there. Huh?
This is one thing that I want to touch on. Growing into the understanding of how I am hip hop and how it manifests in everything that I do. And like Duane said when we spoke a couple of days ago, it's the lens through which I see the world. We collectively grew up in a time before hip hop was a part of popular culture. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so much a part of who we are. But we also saw that transition in the 90s into the early 2000s of how hip hop has become integrated not only into American culture, but world culture. You know, it's a reality. There are people that I've met across the world that despise Americans, but wearing a baseball cap and baggy pants, you know what I mean? Like, and don't recognize where that's coming from. So I always talk to my students specifically, and a lot of the students that I've taught over years, about being of the hip hop generation, how different it is to be of the hip hop generation, because that's what a lot of what hip hop culture that's manifested and reflected to the world is a popular commoditization of the fullness and the depth of the culture that we live, you know? So in speaking about where it is now, I think it's important to kind of just
give some context.
Anecdote, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I feel that, you know, going off of what I was saying in reference to an archival space, the fact that when we were growing up, it was more so hip hop was an echo of what was happening in the 60s in reference to the Black American experience and being proud of that, correct? So you know, I was recently talking to Michelle Burr-McPhee and kind of she hit me to the fact that, you know, Fela was here. When he came here, he was here from Nigeria visiting, and he was inspired by the being Black and proud and understanding that Blackness to inform Afrobeat.
Mhm.
So when I was talking earlier to you about, in reference to the Pan-Africanist discussion, you know, as Black Americans, we don't necessarily have access to our direct source of who we are. So,
Right.
you know, it's through our music, dance, fashion, and language that we're able to connect to like this ongoing transgenerational conversation, right? So it's the fact that now, as we're going into these places and transitioning into these elder spaces, per se, like going into predominantly white spaces. Well, I know I'm trying, look, I'm just claiming I'm loving, you know, I'm just going,
Yeah.
but the fact that now we're going into these spaces and literally becoming the griots of this particular, you know, generation, because we've done,
You gotta be. We have to be the brokers. We have to bridge the issue. We have to bridge the gap. Elegba, like all of these things, connecting the legacy of everything that we know as the truth and the foundation into what we now see, so that people can understand, you know, where things come from. You don't know where it's gonna go if you can't figure out where it came from.
but this is the beauty of what I think this time too, like specifically this pandemic time, for people of our culture that are going from the Marley into academia and are realizing that, yes, our predecessors gave us the opportunity to be in these spaces, but now as these Black bodies in these predominantly white institutions and navigating who we are, not only within this Eurocentric space, but also within how certain Black bodies have like manipulated themselves to be in these spaces. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
One, because we're directly a part of the source of what has informed American culture from the beginning of time, but even more so in the past 45, 46 years, however long hip hop has been literally around. And within the five of us that are here, we've all done commercial work, musical theater, concert dance, and now we're moving into this space of being scholars as well. We have to be the conduits to like an Aunt Joan or to a Pop Pete, or to, and allow them to be themselves in the space. And we're the conduits. We facilitate the conversation, because that's our mission now. So that's why I said at the beginning, you all taking this time to like spread out, like what Moncel is doing every Saturday for those, you know, and I'm using his book, you know, in my classes. Like I was talking to you yesterday about, in reference to contemporary dance, like we all should be talking about what articles we should be citing as a community, so that we create continuity, and that we, outside of whatever institution that we're working for, that our mission supersedes any institution. It's like, this is our work.
Very very true. I mean, like in terms of making sure that not only do we keep the lineage, but we also make sure that we are telling our own stories while we tell our connection to other people's stories.
Speaking of university, the university setting, how do you feel hip hop or hip hop culture is perceived? Crystal, what do you think? What's been your experience?
Working with my chair, being that this is the first year I've been at Point Park, so I'm going to speak on Point Park base.
Okay.
Thank God, Garfield, who is my chair, is very, very open. And like, if I had mentioned him, like, is there ever, in my first year, I'm like, do you think it's possible to do a 3-day workshop or some kind of symposium? We bring in legends and do a 3-day hip hop cultural day. And he's all down for it. And, you know, before that would be like tug and war. Because people were still looking at hip hop still not as a technique. Right. And so today, I feel like they still don't appreciate it enough, but they put it in because they know that's what the kids want.
Right.
Once I get it low art, and once I start breaking down everything to them, the kids, they actually, I was kind of wondering if they want their 5, 6, 7, 8, or do you really want to know what it's all about? Right. And what I'm finding is that the kids appreciate it. They're dumbfounded because they're like, I didn't even know this existed.
Knew. Yeah.
They never knew. And if we don't have more of us in there educating them, these kids will never know. Besides what they see on World of Dance or X, Y, and Z. So I appreciate the fact of, and I really haven't had a hard time. When I was at UArts, I was only an elective. So it never really reached where I am today as in Point Park. Even at Hope College in Michigan, where I'm in the Midwest at a Christian school, you know, they still appreciate what I brought there. And they wanted me to build a curriculum, but then I shift over to Point Park.
Shout out to Michigan.
Hey.
Go.
So it's great to know, and even hearing from former students how much they appreciate what I've been able to give to them, because they probably wouldn't have had it. And then it's doing whatever and not having any knowledge behind any of it, because everything, like we all say, it's the microwave generation.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel the same way though, because like it wasn't really until I went to Ethiopia and to Ireland to where I realized how important hip hop is to the world, first of all, because me being the American in those spaces, as a Black American, naturally I'm associated with a particular type of urban culture. I'm grateful that it is the culture that raised me. So to some extent, I can manifest things that, like you said, whether or not these kids just want a 5, 6, 7, 8, or they really want to know the culture. I'm not going to talk bad about anybody in any in any of those situations, but being in the space where you recognize, sometimes, you don't want no information. You don't want to know about the culture, and you want to video dancing. Like, you don't really want to learn about breaking.
Well,
So, it's just a different perception. And I think that has a lot to do with the exposure. And within academia, that hip hop's like the dangling carrot.
Yes.
In so many ways,
Yeah.
like African dance. You know what I mean? And I'm straddling modern and African in that sense, where it's like, oh, well, we want you to do this, but it's like, oh, but I can do that, which y'all do too, because you're also trained. You can teach contemporary dance. You're not just there as, some hip hop aficionado. That's the culture that you live, but you also manifest it in different ways,
And even with high schools and younger teaching younger kids, a lot of times, in my experience, I've seen these studios or these schools use hip hop to dangle to get their enrollment up. Well, if you want to take jazz or if you want to take hip hop, you have to take some of these other things. So it's interesting how they manipulate, how you see some of these schools that are teaching primarily high school or grade school kids, how they manipulate their curriculum in order to pull in these kids.
Pull in them kids.
Well, I think we have to keep things in context in reference to the fact that, like, they want to keep it one-dimensional, because the minute that you accept the fact that it's three-dimensional, it becomes, you have to accept the lineage, you have to accept the momentum that built up into this,
you have to do more
contemporary form. And I feel like I don't give them a chance, whether or not, because you're going to sweat, like you're going to get the 5, 6, 7, 8. But what else you're going to get? What else you're going to get is the Rondajams, Batmas, and Tandus of hip hop, and being able to understand that you are immediately immersed into the fact that practice is informing the theory through an Africanist lens. And a particular Africanist lens, a Black American Africanist lens. So that is the reason why I'm saying, like, we don't give them a choice, because we didn't have a choice when we had to learn how to hook that foot or how to develop that leg. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is the point.
Right.
Yeah.
You got something to say, Dougie?
No, that was just the point that I was about to get to. Is when you're developing this technique, you have to understand, and hip hop has been modified and kind of washed over for the sake of trying to fit into a specific mode. And that wasn't, like you said before, Duane. I'm so glad you said that, because that's what was bobbling my mind the entire time, is that, you know, other techniques, you have to train your body and learn the history of whatever that is to embody the movement, from Graham to Dunham to, you know, from any of the ballet choreographers. You know what I mean? Like, you have to adapt to whatever history comes with that technique and performance. That's what brings it to life. And although they have found a way to I would say give this more so of a surface projection of what hip hop is really hindering you from the possibilities of what hip hop could be if you understood the history and embraced it. You know what I mean? The validity of what it means, and just the power and what hip hop has. I mean, look how powerful it is now. It's in everything. Like, you know, like we've said before, it's around the world, it's in everything, and yet it's still washed out. So imagine the power if we embrace the true culture, history, and full understanding of the art form. And that comes in all different levels of art.
So true. One of the things that I always express to people when I talk about hip hop is how it was a platform for social ideals, social justice, urban youth expression. You know what I mean? So it wasn't about being a carbon copy. It was about innovation. You couldn't be like somebody else on your block as a freestyle artist. You had to come with your own thing that made you unique. Once it becomes a commercial product, they start to manifest this idea of this is what hip hop is, and people buy into it is because of the fact that's what they see all the time. This is one of the challenges within academia, is that I'm sure you all have gone into spaces, you know, from grade school into university, where you see someone that's teaching hip hop but knows nothing about hip hop. You know what I mean? Like, knows nothing about the culture. They teach in steps and probably banging the steps out hard as all get out, but like, they don't know anything about the culture. And so one of the challenges about getting that validation that we're talking about is it ties into something that me and one of my colleagues, Belicia Charnel Hines, in the theater and dance program at Wayne State University, we're developing a lot of our material and research on the concept of decolonizing the arts. And the only way to do that is to recognize what of the structures and how we learn the arts are of the colonizer. In order to validate this, these different techniques, we have the ability to show its lineage and its connection, but they need to see, to some essence, that it does exist. And we manifest it in theoretical forms as well as in embodied practical forms, you know? So that's something that is great about all of us and where we are in the spaces that we're in, because in essence, we recognize the structure that we had to learn in order to be where we are presently, but we also recognize the validity in the things that were outside of that structure, you know, that are just as valid and within our identity and what we express as products of hip hop in all of these different spaces.
Yeah. I think that the other thing too is, as it goes into this academic space, you know, being able to reference the fact that, you know, this concept of bilinguality or trilinguality, as far as the Black body having to learn Eurocentric movement as far as embodied, but then learning academic language to then interpret or articulate how you're situated in society. And I say that to say, that's what people don't understand. In reference to like transgenerational, yes, from the continent, there's an understanding of how the Black body exists through music, song, and dance, right? Mm-hmm. But through the actual, and going back to your discussion about colonizing and colonization and what that does and how that really morphs the mind and the body about their validation outside of the gaze of somebody or something else. And that's what I'm saying now, because of the fact that it's in the ivory tower, it is, and that we have all gone through the gauntlet or the hazing of being able to receive 3 letters or 6 letters behind our name, that doesn't necessarily validate the fact that our embodied research supersedes any of that. So now time for us to be able to have these forums to then reference African American history and reflecting the fact that in the 70s that New York was like to the Bronx, and everybody, everybody's fighting each other, everybody's killing each other. And it was the fact that the gang started to realize that. The Black body itself started to realize that people that are looking at us, they want us to kill us off.
We need an alternative.
Right. How are we going to empower and nourish and embody ourselves? Going back to the fundamentals of how the body exists: music, dance, visual art, communing with the community, fashion, and that's informing the individual, right? So being able to bring those elements into the experience so that when these babies go into the lab, they understand why they're doing that dance and with the rigor in which they're doing it, and not the fact that they're mimicking somebody else. Like, take in the information and the language for what it is and understand, then you're able to manipulate or evolve something.
Right.
I appreciate the fact that, it's something that should have been talked about years ago, but movement, people of the culture, and bringing it to universities like Columbia, who is shifting their program, because it doesn't always have to be ballet as the point person, the point form of the be all of everything, but there's so many things culturally that needs to be recognized in academia as well. And there is slowly a small shift happening. It's not going to be a huge shift because people believe in their ballet, modern, jazz versus what's happening culturally. But I'm happy where I am, where it's now being discussed and it is a conversation at the table. How do we make it more rounded and bring in these other cultures, not just as an elective, but bring it into the curriculum?
Well, you know what? I think a great way would be to identify the inspiration that other cultures have brought into hip hop. And we, and just like Duane was saying, in the early points of hip hop, it was the Black body in the 70s and 60s, because we have to understand, okay, so what influenced that movement? What influenced the Black body at that time? It was being confined. Was it, big city and moving fast? Martial arts, bringing in the Asian culture. Bruce Lee was huge then, so you have to understand, maybe that went into the breakdance and emulating certain other cultures. We have a tendency to, although we're in an inventive culture, we are inspired by our surroundings, and we have to make sure that we give props to that, because we always want to say, it was us. Yes, it was that, but at the same time, we are inspired too. And so I think if we start to vocalize what those entities are, then the cultures will feel more connected to what's being done and how it's cultivated from there.
Yeah, I think it's that's great, and that's definitely a valid point. But I think it's so complicated. It's a complex issue, because the thing about question I ask all the time is, does change happen in the studio? And or does it happen, or does it have to happen first in society? Because a lot of times what's happening in the arts is a reflection of what's happening in the community. So if we can't come together and talk about these issues in society, then they're not going to be solved in the dance studios either. I think there's a lot of issues with, race is still very much a taboo subject, and which is why, Black culture is marginalized, but it's because people can't talk about it in society. And so then it can only progress for so much in the studios, because people still don't want to talk about it to the extent that they should be talking about it in real life, in culture. So well, I think it's more complex than that.
I think that's our job, is to bring it into the studio. I mean, if we can't wait for society to figure out some things, you have to have leaders. And if you're going to be that leader, then you have to start with that studio. That's your place to start to perpetuate this information and get it out there. And with social media, it only takes, a couple of people to get it, right? Boom. Yeah. And it spreads. It has to start somewhere. And I can't wait for someone else to start that conversation. That's why we're doing this now. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like to start the conversations, to get that ball going, because otherwise we will have this issue for eons to come. But I think we're trying to start that conversation and make it more tolerable, to where people don't feel either attacked or worried that, their perspective will not either be heard or they will be called an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's afraid to be judged. And I think this is an opportunity to kind of let out those conversations so we can start to have people talking.
Yeah. Duane, I know you got something to say, but to touch on, race is a taboo subject, but diversity and inclusion is everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing that we need to address is, what does hip hop, the term in and of itself, mean, right? So taking the fact that hippie means to be knowledgeable or conscious, in reference to Wolof, right? And then hop is synonymous to dance. So the fact that we are knowledgeable movers of a knowledgeable movement, and understanding that is a part of a lineage, that is a part of a spectrum of how the Black body has existed within society over periods of time. And because of that, the vibration of how the body is existing, it creates these movements, this music, the language. So the fact that, in specificity to the Black American experience, and I have to say, Michelle, because we've been talking a lot, because I've been talking about how the African diaspora cultural continuum and really kind of addressing it in that way. And she was like, I think that's great. But I think that at the smaller part of what's happening, and at the thing that is most accessible right now, is hip hop. And that is a Black American experience that is not only affecting America, but once again, the Pan-Africanist discussion historically. So I feel that in reference to what you're saying, Dougie, yes, we have allies. That's a given. But I feel like at this moment, we as a community need to be able to resource ourselves to create a strong space of reference, a strong space of citation and archival space, so that we know who we are in the midst of being in this egalitarian space. Because I think being people of color, we invite people into our space naturally. And we sacrifice ourselves and our wealth within that invitation.
Yeah.
So, I feel like addressing the fact that how was the body in the 60s within or the 50s in the South Bronx, like what was happening. The Great Migration was happening. People coming from the South, people coming, first generation people from the Caribbean and landing in the Bronx. That's how salsa music came to be what it is, because it was the culmination of dark people from the South and from the Caribbean that were creating this new contemporary form of how this body was existing, right? In this new space of opportunity. Because, and to answer your question again, Dougie, in reference to the fact that it was a more universal space in the Bronx before Robert Moses created the Cross Bronx Expressway, which took out the industry, which took out the multicultural, authentic interaction that was happening at that moment.
Wow.
Because then it gave people a chance to go to Manhattan, which creates a whole other cosmopolitan aspect of life in and of itself, regardless of what your culture is. So I feel like, once again, this is the wealth of what we're doing right now, because this is at the inception of what is happening. I look forward to the day when, you all write about how you were a part of basically Disney at a time, for 10 years because of what you did with Raven, and how, how that affected her, and all the other amazing things that you all did in industry, right? Specifically to you as Five, specifically to the history of UArts, because that's a whole other thing,
That's another episode.
Right. I say that to say, those are pockets of history that we all are a part of.
Yeah.
For example, like you have Bernice Johnson, you had JoJo's Dance Factory before it became Heinz and Hatchet, and before it became Broadway Dance Center. You had Philadelphia, you had Jones and Haywood, right? You had pockets of places that Black bodies were training in an interdisciplinary way, right? Now, Anthony's got his studio down in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is the contemporary scene that we're all...
It's the continuum that you talk about.
Yeah.
So now it's like, we need to do this.
Yeah.
And then literally use these conversations as tools to educate these young people as they're in the practice. So they understand why we're telling you to be like, don't give me no half-ass shit, like do the thing.
Right.
I remember hearing Holly talk about when she was working with Mr. Lewis, and he was like, run like a slave. And she was running, and he was like, no, like you're run like for your life. I think that is like, that is, in order to help young people understand how the body is existing, we have to do that. We have to create those dimensions.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
So true.
Well put. That all of this kind of brings me to that article that you sent us earlier, Mikey. Now this one is from KRS-One. Yeah, T-Chop, right? And so what he and I think this was done in 2018.
Well, I don't know what part of the article that you're referring to.
All right, so I'll read it out. Parts of it, yeah. And what he's talking about are the 9 elements of hip hop, and how it's a part of the beginning of independence and self-governance as hip hoppers, right? And those that don't know how that's spelled, that's HIPHOPPAS, hip hoppers. I'm gonna put that into the dictionary.
We got a spelling bee going on too.
Right? But he kind of came up with these 9 elements that define hip hop, and we've touched on them as in our topics, and I'm gonna say them, and then we'll discuss, and maybe we have our own kind of interpretation of the list, or things that you might hear and agree with. Go ahead, Mikey.
Before you read the list, you said hip hoppers, right? Hip hoppers. Didn't Raven used to have a song? This is a joint for all the hip.
For all the hip hoppers.
Yeah.
Shouts out to Raven Simone.
Album, yeah. But yeah,
My sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ray, shout out to Rayo.
All right.
Elements, tempo of hip hop.
All right. Number 1, breaking. Now, I'll say them all first. Breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Only one on there that I don't claim. I don't do graffiti.
But you know what was interesting? My father's an artist. He's right. From graphic to paint to acrylic to what have you. But so it's interesting to hear that particular element because art was always a part of my life. My sister was my first dance teacher. Hip hop, like you said before, learning from your siblings, that was just the norm, you know, and they were always on top of what was happening. So my sister was that teacher. But as far as art, paint.
And what's your sister's name? You gotta give her a shout out.
Shawana Sanders Swain. And I'll give it up for Carl Sanders and Faye Sanders as well. My parents, hello, in Atlanta, Georgia.
Didn't they just have a birthday?
Miss Faye did.
Yes, my mother just had a birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Miss Faye.
Mom.
Get it.
Yeah. Oh, and I got on a pink shirt too. That was just perfect. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
But yeah, so art was always a part of my life. So I noticed graffiti maybe more often than, you know, your average person, because expressing yourself through paint and through this different, because I you know, like I said, I was attracted to dance. So growing up with this artistic background in paint and learning how to mold and shape and draw was really a pivotal point and part of my upbringing as an artist, just in general. And I think that's a part that kind of gets overlooked a lot, you know, is that element of street. He was a splash artist, but, you know, at the time, graffiti was big. And like we said before, with hip hop being considered a low art, you know, that was just another one of those expressions that was considered to be defacing, you know, American property or what have you. It wasn't looked at, but inside the culture, it was. From the time it started, it was beautiful. It was accepted. It was like, yo, wow, this is so creative. This is different.
Yeah.
You know, and that actually just brought me back to what we were saying before about acknowledging what's happening in the culture will help perpetuate it being, you know, catapulted out into popular culture. And so, like we said, starting this is just like being graffiti artists, you know what I mean? And we see the beauty, and the ones who know us will see it. And then sooner or later, people will be doing graffiti, talking all the time, right? It'll become another part of hip hop.
Out of those nine elements, what are there any particular elements that have like a special place for you, Crystal or Duane?
Ladies first.
Go ahead. Oh,
Ladies first. Go. Yeah.
I would say movement. Breaking wasn't my forte, but dance definitely was. I would probably say maybe not now, but back then in the 90s, fashion. Definitely fashion. Like from even though even Mansell had told us, like Adidas is Adidas. It wasn't part of it, but because of Run DMC, Or if I saw Jay-Z with a certain kind of baseball cap on, I was probably rocking. I was rolling the one leg up because of LL.
Right.
So fashion, and I would definitely say language.
Yeah.
I definitely can't beatbox.
Did anybody wear condoms on their clothes?
Huh?
What?
TLC?
Oh, you mean the TLC?
Oh,
I didn't know. I thought it was kind of cool, but I didn't,
I thought it was cool too, but I didn't do it.
I didn't do it either, but I just thought about that.
I rocked my overalls backwards though.
Yes, definitely. At first, Dougie, I was like, "Where are you going with this?" I don't know.
No,
but I got you.
TLC and their whole safe sex, that whole 90s, because AIDS was blowing up.
Yes.
At that era, we lost a lot of great teachers.
Yeah.
To that,
I would definitely say the hustle game too.
Oh yeah.
Street entrepreneurship. Yeah, you got
street entrepreneurship.
So important. I mean, that's how culture survives.
Right.
Yeah.
Duane, how about you, Duane?
I would say all of them, especially the fact that being in this academic space for the past 6 years in an intense way has really made me accountable for how I'm developing it just in my own space and how that informs me pedagogically. Like the thing I'm realizing in reference to those elements that you said, Dougie, is that it's making me want to learn more about African American history, like the details of it, because that will support what we all have been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that now that we all are in this academic space and are now scholars and practitioners, like there is a whole nother level of data that we're in the way in which we hold it and embody it, like it's a whole nother thing. So these aspects of being an entrepreneur through a lens of being an academic, because I'm understanding, or we're understanding that speaking with a friend of mine, Jennifer Harge, she kept using this term.
What? Shout out to Detroit. I know Jennifer.
The D. That got us right there. She's a beast. But we were talking, and she was saying, once again, in reference to the Black American experience, people don't understand this is a form of survivorship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is what is making me accountable to exemplify those fundamentals.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, we're using hip hop as the overarching theme at this moment, but we could say that about jazz when it happened, about gospel when it started, about when Rosetta Tharpe was playing. Did y'all see that footage of Rosetta Tharpe playing the guitar at that train station? Like, people don't even know that she's the queen of
the queen of rock and roll. Yeah.
So I say all that.
That's the post.
Right. I say all that to say all of that affected this. Mm-hmm. And what I also wanted to say was that we could just start with W.E.B. Du Bois, right? Double consciousness. The fact that this one body is living these two experiences. And I feel that what is happening on these social media platforms is because we're talking about private and public discussion, right? So the things that are happening on these these platforms is the public Black American discussion. What we're talking about is cultivating and contextualizing the private discussion, so that we can generate, quality work that's based around hip hop. Because every other country is doing us better than we're doing our own story. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to tell our own story, and if we're not writing it down, then we need to be documenting it in fashions like this.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yes.
Wow.
I've been talking, now I hit the third person. I believe in threes. I'm actually going back through my thesis and possibly getting an editor and focusing more on a female perspective on hip hop dance culture.
Yes.
So I'm looking, and I am not a writer. I don't know how, but I'm just following the path.
Yeah, there's things that are being put into place. Like these conversations that we're having, understand there are things literally that are being put into place so that we are the ones that are creating this data. And we are the ones that are going to be the conduits between the elders that are still alive, thank God, and being able to do a tour to all different universities to feature them, just being themselves. And each place, we document everything that we do. For example, you know, Jason Samuel Smith is on tour with Maurice Hines and the Manzari brothers right now, right?
I did not know that.
Really? I sat with both of them. Shouts out.
So they're doing a tour because Maurice is doing a documentary about his life. And when I got here, I wanted to do something about the Black presence in musical theater. And because Cotton Club of Francis Ford Coppola had just released Cotton Club with all the original outtakes, which was all the original Black performances. They just had a release, I think, in October. And, you know, Maurice is getting up in his age, but I was saying, it's great to have you come here and then name a particular college of study based around Maurice Hines because of who he is in reference to, you know, the Black American experience in reference to like contemporary forms. Theater commercial scene, because that's what him, Gregory, you know, Miss Debbie Allen, all them, like they all come from that same thing, because I also found out that JoJo Smith is related to Debbie Allen. So it's like, this is the work that I'm talking about. Like, we all work at institutions now that are willing to give us some money, and everybody's trying to be the first to do something. But if we create a space of consultation where we own our intellectual property, and we create spaces of faculties that create customized, you know, experiences for institutions, we own it, and they have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm down. You know, as you're.
So that's so know that is what is happening.
Yeah.
That is what is happening.
And like you said before, we're developing what they call quantitative research data. I mean, qualitative. Developing
qualitative
research. Yeah. Because this is what these conversations generate.
Of course.
Allow people to come back and cite this. And we keep building on these conversations and bringing more people in to gain perspective and perception, you know, and all an effort to show people how movement is a part of everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
You were talking earlier about, what did you say? We are knowledgeable movers of a knowledgeable
movement. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I actually had to look up the definition of hip hop, which was awesome.
There's a clip of Dougie Fresh on YouTube speaking about the meaning of hip hop. Basically what Duane tapped on, and he goes into it too. And there's a clip of it.
But like, wouldn't it be dope to have a tour where you have, like, you know, Buddha Stretch, Rennie,
oh my God,
what's his name, Hollywood, Wildebeest, and be able to have a symposium discussion that we could facilitate?
Yeah.
And then take that and use that as a way to really recontextualize social media in reference to, like, you know, being a consumer.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what we're doing. Like, we're recontextualizing how we're being seen, not only in America, but in the world.
Yeah.
So,
So if that's the case, what if there was a discussion panel that brought these different topics in? So yes, we have our dance, and then we can bring in artists, painters, and then you can bring in your musicians, and you have these panels of the real hip hoppers that can teach, you know what I mean? And I love that name, for all the real hip hoppers, right? And what you're doing is you're bringing these elements that are synonymous with hip hop. Yes, that are synonymous with hip hop, and you're educating the new generation.
Yeah.
Before it's too late.
Yeah.
Because we can tell our stories, but our stories are different. You know what I mean? Than the origins, and we need to get that documented before, you know.
We need to
transition.
We also need to be encouraging people to take note of their own stories. You know, as as leaders,
Right.
we are leading people down their best path. We're not trying to create followers. So ultimately, like really generating our own story, manifesting our story and everything that we do, hopefully to be the living example of how other people can manifest their own stories.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good point, Mikey. It's, you know, Dougie and I don't know if Crystal and Duane, you guys know, but Dougie and I are both, we're finishing our masters at UCI right now. We still have another year. We still got another year to go, but
get that shit.
Trying to get it done. But Mikey, that brings me to a article that we just had in our critical issues class when we were talking about authoritarianism in dance and teaching. And you know, I don't want to stray too far off of this topic for this episode, but just real quickly in terms of teaching, with Mikey, what you just said, you know, there was this notion of, you know, when you're being taught, you're always doing what I want you to do and fitting into a very narrow, specific mold. And what you were talking about, encouraging students or people to take note of their own history or their own, kind of guide them to be their own best.
Yeah.
You know, so it just reminded me of that article.
But think about
sometimes when you're teaching.
Think about how we teach dance.
Yeah.
You know, all of us being trained within a studio setting. So we've been in front of a mirror. One of the first things that I tell a lot of my students is don't become a prisoner of the mirror. Like, those are like prison bars. The mirror is a tool to teach you a visual aesthetic that you ultimately should be able to identify physically and emotionally. You know what I mean? So that you don't need that visual reference tool to know that you're hitting that line when you get out on stage, you know?
Right.
So that it goes along with that level of encouragement of finding your own story without getting into the studio, recognizing that you are uniquely and independently made to do whatever it is that you're capable of doing. Less judgment about yourself in relationship to the person that you dancing next to or what you think your body's supposed to be doing in the mirror, and really more understanding of, okay, finding your boundaries. What are your limitations? Pushing yourself within your own understanding of your own limitations. The challenge a lot of times within learning dance is that we're busy competing next to the person next to us. And we all know this. Like, I just knew I wasn't getting into UArts because I was auditioning next to Dougie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I could barely do grapevines. So I was like, you know, like there's no way I'm getting in this school. You know,
that was a funny time, though.
Yeah. But also, like, being at UArts, you know how rigorous the training is. There is that notion of like a peer kind of competition, which kind of fuels everybody. But then there are also those rare cases to where that notion of comparing themselves next to somebody else and them not feeling good enough impedes them from finding their own path of creativity and their own story. You too busy like, oh man, well, I was never good enough.
And then you're dealing with mental disorders now.
Well, I mean, but art is therapy though. Like, I think for all of us, it goes without saying, you know, hip hop saved us, you know, the culture saved us. It gave us something else to look at for ourselves that we could identify with. You know what I mean? Like, and I tell students all the time, like, if I didn't find movement, you know, spiritual movement, physical movement, the philosophical and ideological concepts of movement, if I didn't find that, I probably would have real serious issues. And find the arts as a platform of way of expressing all of those things that I was feeling, the judgments that I may have felt, you know what I mean? Even with the training, it's like, okay, I had to recognize in order for me to fully manifest who I am within this space, I need to let go of the judgments of myself, because I'm not really seeing truly who I am if I'm judging myself or relating myself to somebody else and thinking that that's what I'm supposed to be. You know?
Yeah. I
So
think
yes, it is, it is therapeutical. It is one of those things where it's like, why are we not recognizing? You look at it, the younger generation, and I'm sure you all see it in the spaces where you teach. A lot of these kids are carrying a lot of emotional baggage. There's a lot more emotional sensitivity. And my question to these kids is like, well, why are you not using your art as a way to get through that? I thought that's what art should be for you. Why are you just doing this but haven't found this as an outlet?
I think a lot of kids, and what I had learned, I gave my students an assignment to watch Check Your Body at the Door to kind of get their perspective on dance and what they were thinking versus learning about what these club dancers are doing, and then they go to dance at night. And a lot of them forget to have fun. They forget that they're so caught up on 5, 6, 7 and getting their lines and this and that and getting their grade that they forget to let go. So they're holding all this stuff on their shoulders because this teacher's saying you don't look like this person.
Right.
And like, but you have to let go. Like, it's all about in here.
But I think these are the things that we manifest as individuals, and as we manifest pedagogically as teachers. And that thing, like, you have to be able to find something from within to kind of really catapult you down that road to finding your story. You know what I mean? And we are rare in that those things did not become our stumbling blocks. It was the few, but that to me is a reflection of the movement that raised us. That is hip hop. That necessity to want to have an identity, to be recognized, to be known, like not as somebody else, but for who you are. You may be known.
I think that is the one.
What were you saying, Duane?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that people forget. Essentially, within the Africanist aesthetic, in reference to how spirituality is like at the center, or the sense of healing is at the center of our crafting, right? So in reference to the term breaking, people don't understand why that term is even existing, because they don't understand that it's the polyrhythmic vibration of the drums that is sent into the body that makes the body break spiritually, right? And it's because of the surrender of the body to the rhythm. It's then that connection, right? That's not tangible, right? So I say to my students, understand that I'm not teaching you how to dance like me. I'm teaching you your form of empowerment of using these skills as tools to define your individuality within yourself, amongst your community, right? And I think that in reference to all of our training, because we all were trained by Black bodies that went through a certain time where it was about them having to do the thing. It wasn't about healing themselves. It was like, I gotta pay these bills. I gotta do this. So I feel like now that we are in these spaces and we're the result of that type of pedagogical focus of like, get that fucking leg up, do this,
right.
That, we understand that now how that resonated in us is making us understand that giving this sense of empowerment to our students in this way of healing them and understanding that it's beyond your grade, you should want to do this.
Right.
Because this is going to inform whatever focus of study that you're doing. We need our neuroscientists, we need our lawyers, but this understanding of how an individual exists in community, I feel like that's what art does. Makes people identify with themselves. Like corporeality, like corporal, like how they're existing. If you are not taking in art, you're not living.
Art is always a reflection of change.
Love it.
Wow.
Corporeality.
You're hilarious.
I see you. I hear
Well, you
you.
know, we all, but this is what I'm saying.
I love it.
This is
I
what
love it.
is so dope.
I'm about to start dancing up in here.
Exactly. But this is why it's so dope, because understand, y'all, when I was in grad school, this is what I was, when I'm reading those articles, I was like, my own life. Being at UArts with y'all, I didn't go to UArts, but I felt like I went to UArts.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was saying that earlier. Mark was like, "Did you go to?"
I was trying to remember where you went to
Like-
undergrad. I was like, I think Duane went to UArts.
No,
I didn't
do
remember.
undergrad at all. But this is what I think is so interesting. Like,
I know, right?
people don't understand that place in and of itself, like, you know, before they made the new space, what was the old
309, yo.
309.
People don't know how historic that space is.
Yeah.
That Gamble and Huff was there.
Gamble and Huff, right across from Gamble and Huff, right?
Right, but even in that, like, I remember seeing Melissa Rector take class, or seeing like, you know, seeing
We're
people.
gonna get Koresh on this show one of these days. Like, we got to do the Koresh show.
Got to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say, like, now we're in 20 years later now, or 25, almost 30 years later, you know, we are in the spaces to help people understand the wealth of what this is.
Yes.
From the life that we have, from our lives.
Yeah.
The fact that I directly know you all. You know, it's
Yeah.
not like I have to like find and get to know what your perspective is, or how your angle. I already know that shit, because we grew up doing that.
Yeah.
Right? So now it's like, this is our time. And we're not going to be slaves to tenure. That's what we're not going to do.
Look, I keep saying that. Like, I tell, and I'm not going to, you know, but you're just right with that line there. We can't be slaves to tenure, because our responsibility is to
It's bigger than that.
It's to the bodies. It's to the generation. It's to the broader concept of the knowledge. It's to the movement.
Yeah, it's not tangible. It's not about the numbers that are in the room. It's about this. It's about the nourishment. It's about the wealth that we are talking about in reference to these chocolate babies that are going into these university or higher education spaces. And some of them, because they're going to these new spaces, are not even claiming that they're Black, because they feel that they can, because they have language that they don't even know how to utilize it. So this is the power that we literally have, because every institution that we're at, they want what we've lived and what we have.
Yeah.
So we have to claim that.
Yeah, so true. That is so true.
And with that being said, you mentioned, I like the line about not being a slave to the tenure. But I think more importantly,
we're all on tenure tracks. Let's make that clear. Like, I'm pretty sure we're all me, Duane, and Chris.
Listen, just to let you all know, like, this is how I speak to you all. Is how I speak to these administrators. It's how I speak to my chair, Kate Corby. I love her, because she listens to what I have to say. She understands that I'm going to respect my dynamic to her, but she also knows that I'm a part of a community of people that supersedes whatever mission of whatever institution that I'm a part of.
Right.
Because the institution that I used to work for, prior to the one that I work for now, took all of my ideas to create a program that they have no way of creating. Because they're not associated to the source. They're not associated to a Pop and Pete, to a Boogaloo Sam, or to a Mr. Wiggles, or Khalif, or Buddha. If you don't have these people, it's not going to create the wealth that the culture actually created.
Right.
So you're going to get some third or fourth generation person to come and speak about something that they came in at the middle or the end on. When you need to have the person, if you're going to have them, you need to have somebody that was at the beginning, so then you can have a wealthy discussion to move forward to another place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, and this is taking it back to that, then we have to do what hip hop has done since the beginning, and that's break down and redefine labels and barriers. We need to redefine what a tenure is. You know, maybe this is the beginning of a new class. Maybe podcasting is the new part of classroom discussions. You know what I mean? Like, let's redefine what it is to teach in an academic setting. What is that setting? You know what I mean? This whole COVID-19 has really kind of shifted everyone's perspective on how we can inform and keep going as a society. And so I think this is ultimately a point of reference that we need to keep as a part of our educational tool when we do start going back, you know, to what would be considered a norm. You know what I mean? And this is redefining what it is to be a teacher on a scholarly level. Yeah. Whether it's visually discussing things with, you know, the your class or community or world for that matter. This is the new norm for teaching, and in addition to what we've done previously.
Yeah. And I just think that to add to what you're saying, Dougie, and to go back, because Mikey, you had me dying with that face, like I think we're all on tenure tracks. To go over that again, I've been talking about how, like, so these artists that are coming to school to want to get into the industry, right? How many people on your faculty are able to talk about that transition other than yourself?
Yeah, I know, but it's funny because we had that, I talked to Dougie or probably Marc too about the notion of commercial dance, just something that we're bringing into our program more. And there aren't a lot of faculty that have a knowledge of what that world is, you know? And I think oftentimes the way that my career has gone, many people forget that I have knowledge of that world. You know what I mean? Like, so those who are attempting to go from university into that world, I would know something about it and probably have a network of some way of helping out these students. You know what I mean? Like, so we do have that knowledge to be able to share. You can do this in this space. We've done it, or somebody I know is still doing it. You can do it in this space. We're doing it, and somebody else I know is, you know what I mean? Like, the fact that we have been who we are as movers in the different spaces and in the different arenas and platforms and societies and communities, sharing our own individual experiences, because we're all worldwide. I mean, let's be real, like, all of us have access to things that are outside of the country that we were raised in. You know, we've all done things that represent who we are and where we're from in different spaces. So just that whole idea of maintaining that sensibility of the self within each space continues to transcend and connect everybody to the multiplicities of movement. And coming back through hip hop, you know what I mean? That lens through which we all kind of see things.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, and what I'm hearing from students is that, you know, they don't feel that they're prepared to go into the industry. So what I feel that we're also, we're addressing many things, but I think that we're also within talking about our own embodied research individually and as a community, we're creating a space that is completely new in reference to interdisciplinary work and collaborative work. Like, we're creating artists that understand that language, because right now these kids have no clue. They're so siloed about what they think. I'm like, you're not going to live.
Right.
Because I'm sorry, if you want to be in a ballet company and you haven't apprenticed or been in one now, you may not be in one.
Right. It's going to be really difficult.
So,
Yeah.
but that does not deny your gift, right?
Right.
So what is
Right.
that? So that's what I'm saying, going back to this sense of empowerment, like we're creating this, we're recontextualizing, Dougie, like what you were saying, like we're the ones, they can't do it. Our colleagues can't do it because that's not, they don't have access to that information.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want to say in reference to tenure and saying not being a slave to tenure, because we're checking off many boxes as being assets, not only directly at the institution that we're at, but on a broader scale of scholarship in that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted to say that because I wanted to be clear why I said it, because I also had to create that clarification as well when I said it, you know, to my administrators, because yes, I'm working on my annual review right now, but
you're right. We are assets in the sense that like we have the wealth of knowledge, but like I said earlier, you know, nobody talks about race, but diversity and inclusion is everything in these university programs.
Yes, it is.
Not only are we an asset with the knowledge and wealth of information that we have and able to share theoretically as well as corporally, but we also are an asset to these programs who are trying to reflect a more diverse and inclusive faculty. You know, that's just the reality of what the situation is. I don't think either one of you could say that you probably weren't a diversity hire. You know what I mean? Like whether or not people outrightly say it to your face, like I know because I exist in this world. I may have moved back to America from a foreign country, but I know what this system of institution is. I know how it functions. This is not an HBCU. So I know that if I'm being hired in this situation, then it must be because there is a lack of some sort of visibility of things in people that look like me in this academic space. And that is obviously true in a place like Detroit, because a lot of our program, Detroit being the type of city of color that it is, our program doesn't really reflect that as much. That's I feel that is a reason why.
But that's the thing too. Like I just think that this is our time, y'all. Like when y'all come to school, y'all are gonna be, because there is an alliance that's happening. You know, there's an alliance in reference specifically to hip hop focus.
Yeah.
There is an alliance of universities that's being created.
Yeah.
There's a proposal, there's things that are going out right now. So understand, Dougie and Marc, when you graduate, like you're looking into this.
Oh, I got to get the PhD too. You know, that's the next thing coming.
That's what this work is going to afford us. This is what I'm saying, because, and I had said this when I was in grad school, I was like, I'm going to get my PhD, but I'm not going to get it under the actual hazing of what I originally went through as an MFA student. One, because I also know that the work in which my doctoral work that I'm doing is one that is already specific to a community that is exclusive, one. And two, the fact that because we're in this process of recontextualizing academia, we can create a PhD outside of the ivory tower, which will have them understand how to absorb that. Listen, we have to own ourselves.
Yes, sir.
We have to own ourselves.
You ain't said nothing but a word. That's why
and then ration that shit out. You understand what I'm saying? Like
the more PhDs we have, the more leverage we have within the spaces that actually move things within academia. I mean, like that's I think that the reality of where we all are now is we recognize what we need for more leverage in these spaces. If this is what we want to be in, okay. And I, you know, again, being in Philly, you know, shout out to the University of the Arts, because when I moved back to the States in 2010 and started teaching at UArts as an adjunct in their African dance and diaspora dimension, I recognized that I wanted to do more university teaching, but without a master's, that wasn't going to happen in a full-time level. So I shifted that. And it does give you more not the language thing is what I wanted to mention. Like when Marc laughed about Duane saying corporeality, this is the language that we evolve into in order to be expressed, in order to express the urban perceptions have to frame in a way to these people to where they get it and can give some validity to it. That's why you know, like, this is our time. It's our time to sharpen our sword of knowledge to be able to be in these spaces and not feel, you know how it is in an academic space when you go to a conference and these people use all these esoteric words and you have no idea what they're saying. You know, I feel that our generation approaches that in a different way, to the extent of, like, we learn the language, but there's no need to exacerbate the language if I can get to the point knowing how to switch the tone of my message based upon my audience. And what we're not talking about is the notion of code switching, like that.
Code switching,
how we engage with that within our movement and our navigation through our own respective careers is very important and integral to our success to some extent. And that with doing education and research on that master's or PhD level, you're developing a way to code switch with a different language. Same faces.
But that I think that's also our power as well, you know, and I know that we all have experienced this in a faculty meeting or any type of discussion of being a practitioner of a certain type of rigor and then matching that rigor theoretically and then understanding how to move forward with that. Because a lot of people that do have tenure, they're like, I'm good. You know, I don't need to, you know, whereas for us, it's like we realize who we are. So it's like it gives us more also to understand our power once again outside of this process and structure that people feel like if you don't fall into that, you're not going to be able to ascend to a certain type of success. Our success, we can be able to do this. You know, and I'm sorry, Mikey, what did you say? What did you say?
I said
you can.
The proof is in the pudding. You know?
But that's the thing, though. I think, but I don't think that because we are so, when we are in these programs, we're so worried about getting this new language that we shut off from our own wealth. Like within that conversation of learning the language, and we're directly connected to the source. Like, who has? And in a world where everybody feels like they can turn on their camera and go live, and all of a sudden they're a part of a community. So that is the difference. And that, once again, is how we create a space of longevity and how we create a space of wealth within our intellectual property that's embodied, but also that being that rigor, because once again, we're teaching people in academia that only go from the theoretical side. Practice informs that depth of theory. Practice. Because the minute that you stop using the practice as a way to analyze or as a way to articulate, you're left. You're left. You can talk to me all day till you're blue in the face. I need to meet you on the floor. Because then I can vibe with you and we can sweat and there's an exchange of trust. Then I can sit and do this with you. Because I feel weird about meeting you like this. And then when it comes to doing that, you're like, I'm good. Oh, we're not going to talk anymore. And I'll be cordial, but I certainly won't give you that attention that I gave you before, because now I know what you're about. And I respect that. But I have to consider the source moving forward in which you're located within things that need to be done.
So what are the physical parameters that will change that particular interaction? So do
Keep asking. I wanted to hear what you were going to say in reference to the physical exchange, like because then that gets into a whole other discussion about battling. The thing about battling and the thing about sharing, and the thing about the cipher and what it really means. Like it's not about showboating; it's about being among the community. And the community, because it's a rites of passage at that moment. Like every circle that you're in, whether you're hoofing, whether you're rapping, whether you're dancing, it's the community.
Acceptance.
Community.
Yeah. And that's the thing that people forget in these academic spaces and on these social platforms. If the culture isn't like, you ain't doing shit.
Well, you know what?
That's the board.
That's so interesting that you just brought that perspective up, because in the academic setting, you don't get that aspect of the art. You don't, which is a key point to why a lot of my TAP students have a hard time improvising. They don't get the opportunity, for one thing, because the classes aren't as plentiful as ballet. But on top of that, the curriculum doesn't provide an opportunity to even dive into improvisation and what that even means. You have to be put into a situation to where your creativity is put on display right then. You know, it's just like learning how, you know, we learn language, we learn English all day long. Somebody can, just like choreography, somebody can tell you what to say, give you the script, you can say it however many different ways you want to say. But if you can't develop your own script, then what is it that you've learned? So, and that's what I try to teach in my TAP class, but that's a part of the academic curriculum that needs to come into play. Improvisation, the concept of battling, of putting your knowledge on display, being able to grab and contextualize all that information and make it functional. You know what I mean? You know, that's
great.
And I think that's something that we can start to add into the academic setting. And I think it will add another kind of intensity, because just like how it happens in society and communities, how, you know, there's a level of camaraderie, there's a level of excitement, and a lot of the times you lose that excitement in the academic setting is because you're so focused on trying to detail these fine lines, and like we said before, you forget the fun aspect, you forget the inspiring aspect, you forget to let go and just do it. Because that's where it comes from. It comes from just doing it. Nobody, you know, when you learned it, nobody was like, oh, so you have to do this on the No, you were feeling it. And that, you know, that goes back to, you know, a piece that we set back in the day, you know, feeling it.
Feeling it.
That embodiment of movement, what it means to you. It's the therapeutic. It goes back to everything that we were just saying. That element needs to be implemented into the academic setting. I think that particular part is missing. I think we're the ones to kind of facilitate a way to put that in there.
Definitely. I think it's great that we are all in the spaces and still carrying our information and knowledge into these new realms and arenas as we will continue to do so. What happened to Marc? Marc went away?
Hold on. I think so.
Does anybody... Go ahead.
No. I wanted to say this, y'all. Like, y'all are taping this?
Yeah, we're recording.
You're recording it?
Yeah.
What I'd like to propose moving forward, if we can, like regardless of how things are moving forward in the fall, is there a way that we could try to do this like with our classes? Like possibly?
I would love that.
Absolutely.
The other thing too is that we're teaching them these Africanist concepts like double consciousness or cultural diplomacy, and they don't know how to use these things.
Right.
So I think them witnessing a conversation like this.
We can do open. I think that now that we are all becoming more accustomed to things like Zoom, I think we definitely can make it more accessible within how we teach going forward. You know what I mean? Especially from my standpoint of teaching lecture-based classes, not knowing how the fall is going to be. But I definitely want to engage more with a direct kind of responsive way that my students can be interactive with keepers of the culture, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we can do it asynchronously and synchronously. Like we can, like how we're doing it now, like we can tape it and then, but I think that one good time, like out of the semester where they get to see us vibe like this, because I don't think, you know, even this, we're recontextualizing what it is to be a professor. Like they don't see our counterparts doing this.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Doing this.
And I
So-
know a lot of them are looking forward to this being live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel bad.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny how we just went on last week as a test to go live, and it worked.
Yeah.
We trying to do it official this week, and it didn't work like, at all. So I don't really know. You know, we'll sort that out and see what we can do. But my apologies to those who wanted
But
live. I'm glad that we can still document it
And get it up.
for us.
Yeah.
We posted.
Yeah.
Share the link. We can encourage people to watch it. You know, it's really about just accumulating the resource so we can disseminate the information, and that's, you know, it's all about the
Right.
so that means that we have to just bring, you know, Crystal and Duane back on for a live show one
Yeah.
day, you know, soon, so people could get the experience and chime in. Because I know once they see this, they're gonna be like, "Oh, wait a minute, it's not live. I can't."
But this is the beginning, y'all. This is the beginning of us creating that alliance, and because
Well, the alliance was already there.
That's true.
yeah, definitely.
But I think
We're extending it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But then also acknowledging and actualizing the fact that we do have this power independently as well as collectively.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, we're now attempting to find a way to harness it in a way that we can continue to cultivate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
y'all.
And it's an awesome way to just see the people that I love and
Respect.
adore, and just like you, from the time I've met you guys, like you've been a part of my family, and just to see your faces and just to have this discussion is more than I have the words right now to say, and I'm about to tear up, so I'm about to stop because it's getting that emotional right now for me. I love y'all dearly, dearly, and I'm so grateful that you decided to do this conversation and that we're going to do more. And I'm so proud of both of you for taking that academic leap. And Mikey, you too, and Marc for inspiring me to get back into school and continuing that curve of just dance. You know, the possibilities and where you can take it, and you can do it all within your lifetime. So y'all are testaments of that, and I appreciate
We can
y'all
do it all because we're doing
y'all.
it together. So the individual will be taken care of. We gotta do it together.
Collectively.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Thank you guys for being on.
To the
Appreciate
next
it.
one.
We appreciate it.
Much I say myself.
Love y'all.
See y'all soon.
Until the next time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, man.
All right.
We talk movement.
We talk movements. All right, you guys.
Love you.
All right.
All right.
Love y'all.
Peace.
Peace.